Grace to you and peace from God our Father and from the Lord Jesus Christ. My name is Dr. John Diamond. This is the show, America Unhinged, where we are fervently patriotic and unapologetically Christian. We have been focusing last couple of days on the theme of liberty. And I think it's something that is really misunderstood. Even in the American vernacular today, is we kind of conflate liberty and freedom, and we kind of think that they're the same thing, and they're not. They kind of work closely together, and they can, at times, I guess, be synonymous. But it's also very easy to take those two terms and conflate them and act like they mean the same thing. Now, that's just not an American trait, I guess you would say. This is something they were dealing with clear back into the Old Testament, and especially the Apostle Paul talked about it in the New Testament. So we're going to talk a little bit here in the beginning about liberty, and then we're going to have our good friend Darin Gaub on from Restore Liberty, and we're going to have him on for the entire hour. Should be a great show, and we will see you after this break.
The Cali Key easily converts your AR rifle to bolt action, allowing you to keep the rifle you love in assault weapon jurisdictions. The Cali Key is a true fast drop-in solution. No permanent changes to your rifle. Import, transport, own, and have fun with your AR. Why the Cali Key? Because a bolt action is not an assault weapon. Stay future ready from gun bans with the Cali Key. The Cali Key also lets you quickly and easily build your ideal hunting rifle, lets you build a quiet as suppressed rifle, and benefits your long-range precision shooting. Available now at CaliKey.com with free shipping.
Mike Adams here with an operator, a deployment leader on the Texas southern border who's been using these satellite-based bivy sticks for very effective communications. And he's here just give us a few words about how these bivy sticks are operating, how it's helping he and his team members. And remember, these are available through the satellite phone store, sat123.com. It's satellite-based text messaging. Works when no cell towers work or aren't reachable.
We use these to communicate GPS codes to when we are seeing drug runners or people carrying stuff. We've had, bust up to 13,600 pounds worth of marijuana and fentanyl that we have been on operations with in conjunction with federal agents and supporting them in their operations.
So they are pro-America and pro-humanitarian in helping to keep our country and our communities safe. Everybody, God bless America. Take care.
Welcome back to America Unhinged. Again, my name is Dr. John Diamond. Please find me at AmericaUnhingedRadio.com. I have a lot of things that you can get. We just uploaded that new ebook. This is my Appeal to Heaven book. The entire manuscript, the entire PDF document is available there for a free download. And then you can read about it. You can watch videos on it. It's a very, very important topic. And then you can also download the audio book or listen to the entire book right there on the website. So I would encourage you to do that. Before we get started, I do want to remind you that Dr. Alan Keyes is available for speaking engagements. I'm sure we'll be picking this back up after the new year. We already have one scheduled for him after the new year, and you can reach out at imtv.us, and we'll make that. Today, if you were with us yesterday, I had Liberty Mel Harrison on from the Liberty Action Network. She's doing a great work there. It's really in its infancy, only a couple years old. But her primary thing, like me, is a bridge builder, is to find all these organizations, pro-faith, pro-freedom, pro-liberty organizations, and really bring them together. It's not about follow me or give to me or anything else. It's just about reaching out and finding like-minded people and bringing them together. And our next guest also does the same thing, Darin Gaub. He also has some educational things, which is really where my heart is. So we're gonna have Darin on for the entire segment today, both segments, first and second. But before we get started, I want to look at Webster's Dictionary definition of liberty. To understand liberty, now me and Dr. Keys, we talk about this quite a bit, actually. We talk not every day, but I mean pretty close to every day, a couple of days a week, and we talk for quite a while. And one of the things he's doing, he's writing a book on the Declaration of Independence, and he's really trying to make it clear in people's mind that there's a difference between liberty and freedom. All right, because freedom can be turned into license to, hey, we just have the freedom to do whatever we want. No, liberty means that you're just set free so that you can do right. All right, so let's put that website up, Webster Dictionary. If you're not using this, please do not use a modern dictionary, especially if you're trying to define terms that the founding fathers used, inalienable or liberty or constitution or any of these things. You need to go back to the original and find out what the founding fathers meant when they used these words. So I'm just going to read a little bit from number 1 and number 2 there. Liberty is freedom from restraint in a general sense and applicable to the body or to the will of the mind. The body is at liberty when not confined. In other words, you're not chained up. The will or mind is liberty when not checked or controlled. And this is what they want to do, is they want to control your mind. That's what all the censorship is about. And that's why we have a First Amendment. And a man enjoys liberty when no physical force operates to restrain his actions or volitions. Now, number 2 is very important. I'll only read the first 2 lines of that, but it says, natural liberty consists in the power of acting as one thinks fit without any restraint or control. Now listen, except from the laws of nature. So this is one of the most important definitions, because what you have in America, or really throughout history, is those who are, hey, we're free, we can just do whatever we want. No, you can't, and you never could, and you never have been allowed to, if it violates the laws of nature. The founding fathers used laws of nature. Nature's God, of course, in the Declaration of Independence, which really referred back to God's law. Okay? But this isn't a new argument. I mean, this is an age-old argument. So I want to give you 2 scriptures here real quick before we get started with Darin. It's actually one scripture, but 2 different versions of it. I'm going to look at Galatians 5:13. And we'll look at the New King James and the NIV version of that. Galatians 5:13 says this, but have been called to liberty. Now it's important that you use the word liberty there and not exchange it for freedom or free or anything else. Only do not use liberty as an occasion to the flesh or to the fallen nature, the sinful nature, but through love serve one another. The NIV says, you, my brothers and sisters, were called to be free, not free to do what you want, but do not use your freedom to indulge the flesh. Again, the fallen nature. Rather serve one another humbly in love. So we have to understand we have been set free from the world. We have been set free from the fallen nature. That's what most of Romans is talking about. Your fallen nature, your Adamic nature does no longer have any control over you unless you feed it and give into it. That's one of the things that salvation brought, was a freedom from the fallen nature. As long as you're walking according to the Spirit, then you're set free from what the Bible calls the law of sin and death, or the fallen nature. So we got to make very clear that we have liberty to do what is right. All right. The problem that we often have throughout history and throughout governments is you have governments who want you to do wrong and attempt to use the power of their office to make you do wrong. That's what Pharaoh tried to do with the Hebrew midwives when they said kill babies. That's what Nebuchadnezzar tried to do with the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego when they said, hey, you're going to worship this statue, on and on and on. Pretty much anybody that's written in Hebrews chapter 11 is somebody who understood they had the freedom and they had the right to do what is right, and that no government could coerce them otherwise. So I've kind of rambled on enough. I want to bring our good friend Darin Gaub back onto the program. Darin, welcome.
Hey, Dr. Diamond, it's great to join you again this morning.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been wanting to do this for a while, and I hadn't had a slot where I could fit you into an entire hour. Because again, what my calling is to do is not only network with others, but lift others up, kind of like Aaron and Hur did with Moses there. I've had you on many times. I've had you on with Dr. Alan Keyes many times. He really loves, having you on as a guest. Very, very articulate. It's kind of like talking into a mirror. And as we talked in the pre-show, anybody who just reads the documents should be of the same mind, the same mindset. So I think that's why you and me and Dr. Keyes all get together quite well. I do want to talk about your site, restore/liberty.org, and I really want to take a deep dive into your efforts there. So just give us a little bit of background for those who may be seeing you the first time, where you came out of and how you got to set this organization up.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for that opportunity. No, it's I retired out of the Army in August 2019 with the intention of not doing a whole lot other than being retired, having a simple job, never leaving the state of Montana, and all those things that God laughs at you for doing, which is called making a plan. And as everything that was going on started happening, and prior to even the 2020 election, my co-founder and I started realizing that the one thing people weren't doing was bringing all the groups together and having them cooperate, collaborate, and do the things that are necessary to magnify the voices of multiple organizations. And so we started doing that by coming together and founding RestoreLiberty.org. And so far, it's been very popular, not only in the collaborational environment of multiple groups, but specifically in our educational pursuits. In the things that you talk about all the time, the things that you truly love. People ask me all the time, what's the difference between liberty and freedom, for example? So we get to talk about that just like you do. And we don't want to be, in the world where there are grifters and people with high egos and celebrity and all this kind of thing. That's not us at all. We just want to do our part, do that sacred duty that we're called to do, and let God take care of the results. And we don't always assume a win is a win and a loss is a loss. That it's just all we're called to do is our duty. And if we're there doing that, then that's fine. Everything else will sort itself out one way or another.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I found out over a period of time was if you just kind of look at four political parties, you got the Republicans and the Democrats, you got the Constitution Party and the Libertarian Party. The Libertarian Party and the Constitution Party both agree the federal government needs to stay out of everybody's business. So we're like-minded there. We want the original Constitution to be followed, but the difference, I guess, between the Constitution Party and the members of them and the Libertarian Party is they don't think government should be involved in anybody's life. Therefore, they endorse abortion and, legalize drug use and everything else. So that's why I brought up the definition of liberty there. Yes, we have full absolute liberty, except when it violates natural law. So I think that's right. The thing that the founding fathers understood. That's the thing the Christian church absolutely should understand. There should be no Christian anarchists or Christian libertarians, except to the fact that we are totally 100% free, except for the laws of nature, and nature is God. So that's one thing that you and I and Dr. Keyes really trumpet, loud, very loud.
Yeah, and whenever somebody asks me to talk about those two terms, liberty versus freedom, I do like what you use was the term license, because a lot of people equate freedom to just do whatever you want, whenever you want, and don't worry about it unless it hurts somebody else. But unfortunately, when you do that, it does hurt somebody else. And the simple fact of the matter is that there is a fixed moral law that is not human in nature. And if we're focused on that fixed moral law, that binds us to duty. And it's just one of those terms that, as a veteran, it sticks out pretty heavily. Is we must do our duty no matter what, and our duty is to, operate within the liberty and the freedom we have to achieve all those things that magnify the moral perfection of God, and our duty to do our best to abide by it. It's easier said than done, obviously, but if we keep striving towards it, then we do what I like to call, the priorities of God, family, country. That you get right with God, then your family benefits. You get your family right and God right, your country will just follow along behind it.
Yeah, and I think that's why God called me into the space as a theologian, because I was a theologian long before I was a constitutional scholar or anything else. But I had already graduated seminary, and then I started reading the Founding Fathers documents, and then I started realizing everything that they saying was biblical, had biblical truth supporting it and backing it up. So it's one thing to just talk about the Constitution and Bill of Rights and everything else, but ultimately the Word of God is where we get our ultimate authority. So when we can tie the authority of God's word to the founding of the nation and the documents they wrote, that really gives us far more authority rather than just referring to a piece of paper written by man. Because, you've seen what Obama said. It's just a GDP, or Bush, I think, said it's just a GD piece of paper. And Obama said the same thing. I mean, whatever man, if you divorce yourself from the laws of nature and nature's God and the fact that our rights are given by God and they're inalienable, now you can have these tyrants just change the Constitution to say whatever they want. And that's where we're at today. We got legislators trying to legalize gay marriage across and homosexual. You don't have any authority to do any of that. You don't have any moral authority. You don't have any constitutional authority. And that's what we need to get back to, is that understanding that these people have far exceeded the authority that anybody, including God, has given them.
Oh, absolutely. And I like to use the term Godverment. In the end, what they've done is taken the true God off the throne in their own minds and replaced him with government, and they worship at that throne. And they seek dispensation from that throne by the processes that we see around us through elections and lobbying and financing and all these kinds of things. But that's also why when in their minds this government or government that they worship fails, that they are seen as such an emotional reaction. And you saw it when Hillary Clinton lost the election in 2016. The reaction of the people was basically their God had failed them. What they worship had failed them. And part of you has to have some sort of pity towards this, because if they knew the real God, who I would love to share with them anytime, they would recognize the fact that that God is on the throne. He's on there permanently, and nobody can remove him. Ever. And so that's why no matter what is going on around us in the chaos and wherever these legislators and politicians or whatever they're doing to try to remove God from the throne as well, we can remain calm in the midst of that storm because we know who's ultimately in charge of all things. And they just don't have that foundation. And it's a foundation that our education system, our government, and so many others have deliberately removed. And we see the results in front of us at all levels and all ages.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting that you said that, because my Appeal to Heaven book, and again, I would ask everybody to go there and download the free book, because that's what it is. It's about removing God from his throne. And again, this is something that's been going on since the Garden of Eden. At first, it's what Satan did, or Lucifer did. I will be like the Most High God. And then he goes into the garden. You will be like the Most High God. It's about displacing the Lord as king, lawgiver, and judge, essentially. So you read Psalms 2, what's it say? The kings of the earth and the rulers have conspired together against the Lord and against his anointed. I mean, that's been going clear back to the time of David. And then when you look at the birth of the New Testament church, and the apostles just got beat by their government, what'd they do? They went in the upper room, and what'd they pray? Psalms 2. The kings of the earth have rebelled against you. They're trying to dethrone you. Now give us the boldness and the courage to go out and turn this world upside down. And that's exactly what they did. So we are dealing with a major spiritual battle that's a Luciferian spirit that just basically wants to dethrone the Lord from his throne.
Absolutely. I mean, and since that will never happen, ultimately all they're going to find out is that God is always on that throne, no matter what mirage they paint in front of them to make it look like it's different. And I was up giving a speech just this past weekend to a pachyderm club, that Republican offshoot club. And I guess I finished it up by saying, hey, listen, when you look at Ephesians 6, we have to remember that this is a spiritual battle, but the picture that's painted for us in Ephesians 6 by putting on the whole armor of God is that all of that armor is on your front. It's to protect your front. So you're allowed to do two things. You can pause and you can advance, but don't retreat. Don't give up. You don't have to give up. because you know who's in charge of this universe and you know who's sitting on that throne. And so we don't have any cause or any need to ever give up. Now we can keep moving forward. We can keep doing our sacred duty, and we can keep putting the results and trust in God's hands and trust in Him, no matter whatever chaos is around us. So we can keep advancing within the limitations of our skills. And we all have different skills, and there's a very faith-based and church-based solution to this problem is to come together as groups and individuals and recognize each other amongst each other that we have individual gifts that we can bring to the table, and we put all those gifts together and work together. Then that is a church model that plays out in the civic arena. And when you have those two going together, it is very difficult to stop. And so why should we stop? I don't believe we should ever quit. We should keep moving forward and just let God do what He does. And our job is to follow in faith.
Yeah, I actually did an entire teaching on the whole armor of God. I mean, this must have been 8-10 years ago or something. And the piece of equipment on the armor of God was the shield. And what a lot of people don't understand, because, we get this in our little Bible studies and stuff, is, they got a picture of a shield that's like a trash can lid, and that's not what a shield was in the Old Testament. I mean, if you actually look up the word shield in a Greek concordance, it says door sized. I mean, it was the size of a door. It was like taking the door off your house, and they would cover it in cork, and they would put gel in it, and then when the enemy shot the arrows at them, it would quench the fiery darts. But it was an offensive weapon. It was a shield used for offense. It wasn't a shield used to hide in a corner somewhere. So again, offensive. This is what the church has not been. We have not been offensive for a long time.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, and that's, we did a seminar recently down in Mississippi beginning in November timeframe. We got in front of a group of pastors and just basically said that if what drives you every day within a church, what you fear is violating a 501c3 tax status, then I would say your focus is wrong. You need to do your church regardless of your tax status. I mean, you can either just fearlessly move forward and not worry about it and just see if someone cares or does something, or you can change to a private membership association. There are other options that are out there, but we should never, as a church, take ourselves out of the civic arena just because we're behind the wall of a tax code. That just seems, something that we shouldn't be doing. And we're supposed to be the predominant influence on our culture.
Yeah, and boy, we've talked about that on this show here. We've had some people on talking about a 508, which is basically, just telling them, look, we're tax exempt, and you just acknowledge we're tax exempt. So we don't worship you, we don't follow you. I had the resistance chicks on. We went out and spoke at Plymouth at the Mayflower thing, and it really hit me back then. I mean, the Pilgrims left because the government had basically created a corporation, and the church was a corporation. They were under the church, the divine right of kings and everything else, and they fled from that because the king declared himself the head of the church, and you're starting to see that move, with the creation of the IRS and the tax code and all of this stuff that didn't exist 100 some years ago. And now you basically have churches that work for the government for the most part. I had a lady on not too long ago, I think it was last week, who Homeland Security has actually trained thousands of pastors to basically work for the government just in case they call out martial law. So, I mean, it is a very, very sad state that the Christian church is in today when the government basically becomes their God. And I think COVID exposed that. It's like, who are you following? Who are you obeying? Are you obeying God or are you obeying man? And, the apostles, when they got beat by their government, what did they tell them? We got to obey God rather than man. So I really don't see that faith existing a whole lot in this country anymore.
No, that's true. And I think it would be worth it for people to look back through history and take a very good example of when the church ignored its culture again, and the results of that. And you can look straight to 1930s Germany.
Yep.
In that church, went behind its walls, ceased to influence its government and the people around them the way they were supposed to. And the results certainly speak for themselves. And that is I guess you could say, a fear that we should that should motivate us here as a church, the Christ church, not just any structure calling itself a church is a church. Obviously, it's there is a corrupt corporate side of it, and then there's those who follow Christ and his teachings, two different things. And those who follow Christ need to be out there at the forefront leading. Maybe somebody will listen at some point, but at the very least, we should be out there making sure that we are the prophet on the wall, warning people. The listening is up to them. The warning is up to us.
Right, exactly. And I had a lady on last week that survived the German Holocaust. So, I mean, when you think of what happened just really not more than a generation ago, I mean, you had the rabbis telling the Jews to get on hey, the government's just looking out for you. They just care for you. Get on the train so they're going to take you to safety, right? And they took them to get gassed. And then you have the Protestant Christian church who just, every time a train went by with people screaming for their lives, they just sang louder. So, man, we've got some great historical examples to look back and not do. So we're going to cover this when we come right back from this break. We'll be right back.
The world we once knew is collapsing. We're being warned to expect rolling blackouts, and our political leaders are deliberately shutting down pipelines, fuel refineries, nuclear power plants, and energy exploration. The currency is collapsing, while financial assets are plummeting in value, and the global food supply is being deliberately decimated. To survive this war being waged on humanity, you need more than just regular prepping. You need resilient prepping. And that's the title of my new free audiobook, Resilient Prepping. You can download the entire audiobook and a printable PDF transcript for free right now at resilientprepping.com. Resilient Prepping teaches practical strategies for prepping in 3 layers: high-tech, low-tech, and no-tech. Resilient Prepping is your ultimate guide to surviving the total collapse of the world as we know it, because that's exactly what globalists are trying to achieve. Download this entire audiobook for free right now at resilientprepping.com. At the Brighteon store, we offer a variety of colloidal silver solutions that we make in Texas using Texas rainwater and specialized circuitry that I personally designed to produce silver ions in purified rainwater. We have a colloidal silver extra strength spray, a silver-based first aid gel, as well as a colloidal silver herbal mouthwash solution that people just rave about. Each one of these is subjected to our rigorous laboratory testing for metals, glyphosate, and microbiology in order to ensure product purity and safety for your health. We manufacture our own silver products right in the heart of Texas and deliver them to you using our own warehousing and fulfillment infrastructure that we built to serve real America. All of us here at Brighteon thank you for your support. Shop our silver products at brighteonstore.com.
Welcome back to America Unhinged. Again, find me at americaunhingedradio.com. We have several projects that we're going to be working on at the beginning of the year, and we'll be creating a whole bunch of video series dealing with a variety of topics. One of those is going to be the 12 lies, which are a lot of lies that the church and the pastors have bought into, which is why they stay in the 4 walls of their church. What I'm teaching right now at church now is called the whole duty of man. And it says oaths and duties and vows, and what the Bible talks about when it talks about oaths and duties, and how serious God takes oaths, whether it's an oath of enlistment in the military, whether it's an oath of office, whether it's a wedding oath, whatever it is. When you take an oath, God takes that very, very, very seriously. And I take them back to the Old Testament, where God told the children of Israel not to make any covenant with anyone in the land. And then they got deceived and, hey, we're just traveling through, make a covenant with us. And they did. And then Saul come along later and killed them. And then he brought a curse on Israel because they were bound by that. So Darin, welcome back to part 2. When I was going over your website there, affirm your oath to America, that tab right there, man, that is something that I think many of us have already taken the oath. You as a veteran have taken it. Me as an Air Force veteran have taken it. Talk a little bit about the oath there, maybe for somebody who has never had to formally take that oath.
Yeah, this oath was actually put on here during the point where we were trying to get a veterans gathering in D.C. At the 20th anniversary of the invasion of Afghanistan, and everything, of course, that had happened as a result 20 years later, just to tell people that the veterans were fed up with this kind of thing. But ultimately, also what it is an educational tool, because those who've never seen this or read it or broken it down into its disparate parts have really truly don't really understand fully what the military specifically is taking an oath to. And it says, "I swear or affirm I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States." And that's it. That is your number one priority. And the sad thing is, what happens when your entire governmental structure, specifically at the federal level, we'll talk here, is no longer doing their job, is violating the Constitution. And I like to substitute the word contract, because it's a contract between the people and the federal government that binds them to certain limited powers, and they are in breach of contract. So if they're doing that, they're wrong. They have to be held to account. And when we say that we reaffirm our oath, we reaffirm the fact that we don't take an oath of fealty to a person or to a throne or to anything. We take an oath that says we will support and defend that Constitution under which every single American citizen lives. Now, the hard part, of course, is it says all against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and it's very specifically says foreign and domestic, and we've never really fully recognized what it means to say what is a domestic enemy. I'm sure there are many, many arguments out there about what that means, and I don't know what that looks like right now to uphold the Constitution against a domestic enemy. I know what I don't want it to look like. I would rather it self-correct at the governmental level, but we also have to remember that these are the same founding fathers who said that we as a people have the right to throw off our government and to reinstitute something that does its job, which is to allow us to pursue self-government the way it's supposed to be. But that would be the inherent output of constitutional governance in the first place. So let's get back to the Constitution and remember that our oath is to the Constitution, not to a person.
And the thing is, and I'm looking at it right now on military.com, you got the oath of enlistment for enlisted and for officers. And the oath of enlistment for officers, which you took, it doesn't say anything about the president. But for the enlisted, it says, "I will support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, and I will obey the orders of the president and the officers appointed above me." Well, this is what my Appeal to Heaven book is all about. What if the president is violating the Constitution and ordering you to violate the Constitution? That's the problem that we have always had throughout history, is the Constitution outranks the president, and the president thinks that I can do whatever I want because I have the military and I have everything else, and I have the courts agreeing with me because I put the judges there. We're dealing with the same thing the founding fathers were back before the first American Revolution. Was Britain had a constitution, right, that was created 100 years before our revolution, and the king and the courts and parliament were violating all of it. So that's always, it seems like that cycle just repeats itself, Darin.
Yeah, history has a funny way of repeating itself like that, and to me, it's about that fixed moral law, and that's a point in space. If you were to draw a dot in space and say that is the fixed moral law, all they're trying to do is just erase it,
right,
and put themselves in its place. And if you do that, then every 4 years, at the presidential level anyways, your fixed moral law is moving with whoever that person is. That's why I hate government by executive order. It shouldn't happen on either side.
Correct.
Now, the problem is, of course, you've got a Senate and a House who are opposite, they're two wings on the same bird, all working against us, the people.
Right.
And now you start changing that equation into a bigger problem set, and it is much harder to fix. And this is just an oath to remind ourselves that first of all, the Bible does say, "Let your yes be yes and your no be no." So going into a swearing or affirming something like this, to people like me who take it seriously, and to you who take it seriously, it means it doesn't expire. Once you've given it, it's given for life.
Right.
And my yes is yes in this. And so I'm going to fight until my last days, whatever those last days are, to uphold the Constitution, because by doing so, I'm actually upholding an institution that was God ordained in the first place.
Yeah, and that's going to be part of the course when I get to that part, like an oath of enlistment, because and I had a veteran say one time, well, that expired when my enlistment ran out, and I'm like, you better go back and look at your oath. Did you say that I will support and defend the Constitution against all enemies for the term of my enlistment? No, you didn't put any time parameters on that, right? So, I got convicted of this many years after being out of the military, that I already took this oath. God's not letting me off the hook. You can you can try to convince yourself that you're letting yourself off that hook, but you're kind of mistaken when you do that. So that's a great topic. I'll be teaching that as part of my course here in the next couple of weeks. I do want to hit two things before. We got plenty of time, about 15 minutes left, but there are a couple things on your site that I really want to talk about. One is the Federalist Papers, the 21st century. Now, for my audience, those who don't know, when the Constitution was written, it went to the states, and there was a whole bunch of articles, both pro and against, ratifying and becoming this constitutional republic. Those who agreed with it wrote the Federalist Papers, and it was written by Hamilton and a few others. And then you had the anti-Federalist Papers that were like, guys, if we do this, this big government's just going to swallow up everything and going to enslave us again. So I think it's very important to read both the Federalist and the anti-Federalist Papers, because the anti-Federalists were spot on in what they basically prophesied would happen, because it's happened throughout history. I want you to talk about the Federalist Papers, the 21st century, that you got there on your website.
Yeah, no, that's I wrote the next Federalist paper in this series, and said, this stopped obviously many years ago, and asked myself, what would this look like today? And this is something my co-founder and I have both agreed to, that we needed to get started, because we really wanted our organization to have a track record of the thought process behind what we're doing, because we know our government's going to continue to come after anybody who's liberty-minded, who is constitutional, who is fighting for this nation and its freedom and educating its people and what we should be standing for. So this was part of that, and we thought that the Federalist Papers was a great way to get academics, again, involved. And I wrote this one as sort of redrawing that dot in space for the fixed moral compass for a nation, and reestablishing the baseline from which we could continue to write further Federalist Papers, 87, 88, 89, and on as we go. And as you can see, there's only one in there right now. And the goal is to be able to reach out to folks like maybe a Victor Davis Hanson or yourself or Dr. Keyes, and say, hey, we're not looking to write a master's thesis that's 70 or 80 pages long, but is there a passion that you have that is a singular topic that could be done in about 2 pages that we can put on this page, and people could come to it and actually use it as an educational resource? Because if you take these things and just read them, you can take the paragraphs and the language and the different parts and pieces of it, and you could really take just that first one that I wrote and spend years teaching on it. So what if you just, you're talking about the oaths, what if someone were to write about what that means? What if someone were to write about education? What if someone was to write about, and you pick that special, narrower topic, that we can put that on there and people can go there and use it however they want to do it. We're not selling these things. We want them just to be out there and for people to use them as a form of education and debate the way we're supposed to operate in this country.
Yeah, that's good. And like I said, once I film that, the whole duty of man, the oaths and duties, and it'll probably be about 8 videos, probably 8, maybe 45-minute videos. We'll certainly make those available to you, and then you can share with everybody and make this a free educational resource. The thing I try to get people to understand about the Anti-Federalist Papers, you ought to read it and look at the warnings, because all the warnings came true. All right. So, we're kind of, that's water under the bridge. We're past that. Yeah, it's like warning somebody, hey, don't fall out of the plane, and they fall out of the plane. And then they're going, okay, what do I do? Well, you've already fallen out of the plane, so you're past that. So the Federalist Papers are very important, though, because, when the Constitution was written, you may have a clause that's about this big in the Constitution. But what a lot of people don't understand, there was an entire Federalist paper written to explain that one cause. So when the Supreme Court looks, like the creation of the federal judiciary, it's a clause that's about this big. But if you go into the Federalist, and I can't remember which Federalist paper it is, but you go into it, it says, let us now consider the federal judiciary the proposed government. It is by far the weakest of the three, having neither the power of the purse or the sword. So is that the way we act today? Do we act like the Supreme Court is the weakest authority of the three? No, they're an oligarchy that whatever they say, we have to do. So we have fallen so far from original intent, it's not even remotely funny.
Yeah, and we've had this conversation with our mutual friend Jim White up here with Northwest Liberty News in Montana about how when a court renders something, they render an opinion. Okay, that's their opinion. Now try to enforce it.
Yes.
You can't. And so I like to say, if you live by the rulings of the Supreme Court, you're going to die by the rulings of the Supreme Court. And whether it be over, whatever the gay marriage ruling was, or the rulings on weapons, whenever these things come out against you, it's terrible. Whenever they come out for you, it's wonderful. But if that's the limitation of how we're supposed to be governed, is the final ruling of the Supreme Court justices in black robes, then this country is way beyond where it's supposed to be. Sure, they've rendered an opinion. Okay, that's interesting. We the people disagree. And ultimately, we the people are the authority, not the Supreme Court.
Yeah, and I covered that the first book I wrote 20 years ago, Fighting the Next American Revolution. I showed when FDR came to office and wanted to expand the power of the federal government. That's why we have term limits now, because he basically outlived all the justices, and he put all the justices there who all rubber stamped him growing this big, large federal government. And they were overturning cases that they had just heard 2 weeks before. I mean, this was an activist court. This was an activist agenda. It was not based on original intent. It was not based on what's it called, stare decisis, where the decision has been made, it's absolutely insane. Because if you study the founding documents, they argued. If you read the Journal of the Constitutional Convention, they argued whether or not to give the Supreme Court veto power over legislation. And they said, no, let's give it to the president, because we can remove the president. We can't remove the justices except by a hard, painful process. So no, let's give veto power to the president. Well, it's not being like that now. If Congress passes something and they don't like it, they essentially, for all sake and purposes, they veto it, and you're not allowed to do that. They are giving an opinion. That's why the majority opinion, the dissenting opinion. We're supposed to take that opinion and look at it and see which one we think is the best, and then we take that opinion lined up with not only God's law, but constitutional law.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why the one thing, I guess, if I were to go back to the beginning and say, write this in to the Constitution, it would be that every representative up there is term limited. And that could be 2 terms as Senate and 3 or 4 terms as a representative, because all of these people who go there, picture your Nancy Pelosi or your McCarthy, it really doesn't matter. They don't have to live under their votes. They pass their summary judgments down to the people and never have to suffer the consequences of what they're doing. They fight over committee assignments, not based on whether or not it's what's best for America and how best they can serve. It's how can I gain power, and more than likely, how can I get the money from the lobbyists in order to do this? We've created this oligarchy in D.C. because we've allowed them to live in a completely separate reality from the rest of us, and they never have to consequences. If we fixed that, I dare say some folks might make a few different decisions in what they vote on, because now they got to live under it.
Yeah, you're right. And that's exactly the state and the condition that we're in today, is what do you do when everybody at the federal level or even the state level that is basically a criminal, is a lawbreaker, is taking bribes, is passing laws. Remember what Jesus told the Pharisees: you bind men down with all these laws and you don't even lift a finger to do them yourself. This is always the corruption of power. It existed in the day of Christ. It exists now. They pass all these laws and they exempt themselves from it. Social Security and health care, they exempt themselves from everything, but you guys have to do it, which shows that they're nothing but of a bunch of elitists Well, then again, what do we do? What do we do when the people that are supposed to be administrating justice do not do it? That's, again, where my Appeal to Heaven book comes in, because there is still one courtroom above them, and that's the court of heaven. So that's what our founding fathers wrote when they wrote the Declaration of Independence. They said, we're appealing to the supreme judge of the universe. We're going above your head because you're obviously either criminals or you're not upholding justice. And that's why the subtitle of my book's called A Cry for Divine Justice, because we certainly need the Lord to intervene and kind of take these people out in whichever way he seems to fit.
Yeah, there's been a lot of folks that I've been talking to that are saying that their prayers lately are to save them or remove them, whatever that looks like. And so these people are not worthy of being in positions of service. And I don't like to call it positions of power, because that's what they want, is power. I want people who look at it like service. And if they don't approach it that way, they shouldn't be there. Look at what you and I do. It's not like we're making a lot of money on doing this kind of thing. This is a service to our nation. I personally never wanted to have to be doing any of this. And after 28 years and 7 deployments overseas and all the kinds of stuff that goes along with that, this was never on my bucket list, I'll put it that way.
Right.
But God calls forth who he will call forth, and they're supposed to be obedient and to whatever end. And so I'm going to keep doing it, however long it takes.
Yeah, and you brought up a great point there about power and authority, and I have that in my Appeal to Heaven book. You know, a bully has the power, a 12th grade bully has the power to go beat up a third grader and take his lunch money. He doesn't have the authority to do it because he's violating the law. That's all tyranny is government officials who now have a military, have a police force, have a court system that they can beat you up and punish you if you don't do what they say to do, but they don't have any authority to do any of it, because all authority, according to Romans 13, comes from God, and in America comes from the Constitution. Well, if they can't look at the Constitution or look at God and say, I have this authority, then they're basically tyrants and bullies, and they need to be removed from office.
Yeah, and we use another term in America called consent of the governed. And so ultimately, that's why we have the real authority, is because we govern it by our own consent. And that's why we have on our website there that Declaration of Constitutional Consent. That was written because we wanted to take a look at educating people on what the Founding Fathers intended for government to be, what it ended up being right now anyways, and going through the same process they used as a legal justification for actions that they would need to take in order to unplug themselves from the British throne. And
Right.
We wrote 18 grievances in there that are very much using the similar language, but using the situation of today. And it's not intended to in any way, shape, or form replace the Constitution or Declaration of Independence. We want those to be used as written and as intended. But this is just a document to help magnify that voice and give people something that's kind of petition-like that they can sign if they agree with what it says. Print it off and mail it to somebody, or use it as an educational tool. It's just there to be used for all the above. And my deputy director and I wrote that because we both truly and wholeheartedly believe that what we're not trying to do is throw off a government. We're trying to get back to our government the way it was intended to be run, by us, the people, at our consent.
Yeah, exactly. And COVID exposed that. When people asked me why I wasn't wearing a mask, I said, because I don't consent to it. And they're like, what do you mean? And I said, Declaration says they govern at the consent of the governed. I don't consent to wearing a mask. And they just look at you like you're speaking in some foreign language, which you are, because they've never heard it or were never taught it. Little under 2 minutes left. I want to go to your site where it talks about state directors. Tell people how to look at that map, and then how to reach out to you and your state directors so we can continue this on.
Yeah, the state directors are awesome. We're not looking for anybody who's celebrity. We're looking for people who can put their ego on a shelf, who can move forward with just doing the hard work. And you're going to find everything from homeschool working moms or dads to tech people to I guess basically it's just your so-called average American, if there is such a thing, who said, I'm going to stand up in this state and work for restored liberty on a voluntary basis and advance the cause of liberty and under the plan that we have as an organization, because they believe in it. And by the way, there's no faith litmus test, but everybody's faith-based. We open our meetings and close them in prayer. If they send a email to patriots@restore-liberty.org, we can connect them to state directors. And so you're just going to find phenomenal people in all these states, and this map needs to be updated. There's been a few changes here and there we've added and had some fallout for a variety of reasons, and that's okay. But if just a simple email to that inbox and patriots@restore-liberty.org, and we'll connect you to a state director. And you're going to find some very awesome people that are working in the background to bring liberty back to this country.
Darin, it's always a pleasure to have you on. We'll definitely do it again next month. I just want to wish you and yours there a very Merry Christmas, and we will see everybody else next week. God bless. See you next time.